Broadcasting live from an undisclosed location. This is the TCMMA podcast with your host, Chris Cross.
Whoa!
Dana White privilege.
Let's go, baby! Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! Let's go, baby!
Dana White privilege. Privilege. Privilege.
What up, what up? This your boy Chris Cross checking in, and this is the TCMMA podcast, and we are just days away. I repeat, we're just days away from UFC 300. You see the smile on my face? This is the most excited I've ever been for a UFC event because this card is stacked from top to bottom. From top to bottom. In fact, today, MMA Junkie ranked the 13 fights that are coming before us in order from least to greatest, if that's even possible. And the bottom three makes sense. Andrade versus Rodriguez, Marina Rodriguez, Bo Nickel versus Cody Brundage, and Bobby Green versus Jim Miller. Those are the bottom three, beginning with Andrade versus Rodriguez. And it's hard to believe that Bobby Green and Jim Miller are in the bottom three. That's how good this fight card is, because that's a lightweight fight and highly interesting. Also, Dricus Du Plessis, refused to let Israel Adesanya dictate UFC 300 booking, saying you are summoned when I say you're summoned, right? And we've seen this from Dricus now because he's the champ. He's the champ. He wants to control when he's going to fight, and he won't be pushed around, and he shouldn't be. Adesanya lost the belt. Du Plessis holds the belt. He makes the decisions, bottom line. And Daniel Cormier alluding to the fact that Arman Sarukian's toughest, least lucrative fight for UFC champ, Islam Makhachev. And yeah, I mean, Makhachev versus Sarukian is a fight that a lot of people want to see. But can he beat Oliveira? That's the first thing. If he does, they're going to fight at some point. But it's not a lucrative fight for Islam. So I agree with Daniel Cormier. Dustin Poirier reveals UFC hasn't offered him Islam Makhachev fight despite recent chatter. I don't know what's next, Dustin says. And that seems like the fight you want to make right now for the sake of the UFC and Dustin Poirier. He's not going to have too many other chances in this situation. Laura Sanko saying Kayla Harrison joining UFC is exactly what women's MMA needs right now. And it's true. You kind of need something to mix it up in the women's divisions. You don't have a dominant champ just yet. You have some good champions right now, but you get the feel that the belt's going to be changing hands a lot in the near future. And if Holly Holm beats Kayla Harrison, she should fight for the title. And this is an opportunity for her to win the belt. Make no mistake about it. Ian Mikado Gary claims he signed to fight Colby Covington, but will Colby Covington sign to fight? Doubtful. We'll get into that. Dana White reveals origins of BMF belt. Declares Max Holloway probably, he says, greatest featherweight of all time. And this is, of course, ahead of UFC 300. He's trying to pump up the fight. Israel Adesanya predicts Jamal Hill will KO Pereira at UFC 300. And I think there's a lot of people that are in line with Adesanya on that. But first, let's begin with the biggest story to me, and that's that Ramadan is officially over. Ramadan is officially over. And how does this affect the UFC? It affects the UFC big time because the UFC has a lot of Muslim fighters, Islam Makhachev, Khamzat Chimaev, to name a few. And they can eat during the day now. They can eat at night. They can eat whenever they want. And training is going to start to heat up for both of these guys ahead of highly anticipated fights. Islam hasn't had any fight made official yet. That's what Dustin Poirier is talking. Khamzat is going to be fighting Robert Whittaker in about 2 months. So that's plenty of time for him to put on the weight and then shed the body fat and be ripped and in great shape for that fight. So I'm glad it doesn't affect me, right? Ramadan, I'm not fasting, although it's very good for your body to do so. Let's be real. Even if you're not Muslim, it's very good for your body to fast. So for these Muslim fighters, which is why I'm intrigued by it, have cleansed their body. They're ready to rebuild it. And they're going to be ready to go in the best possible scenario, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months after Ramadan. So I look for a very healthy Khamzat to come in and absolutely dominate Robert Whittaker. That's one of those fights where I will not break ever. I think Khamzat beats everybody. It's as simple as that. And especially now that Ramadan is over, we're going to start seeing some training footage. We're going to see, if you could say, a return to normalcy, in a sense that, listen, if you don't fast like me, you're thinking of it like, man, I can't eat all day when the sun's up. That is some dedication, man. That's not easy to do. But they do it every year, and they come out healthier on the back end. And this is why these guys are smart. Some of the Muslim fighters will fight during Ramadan, but they're smart not to. Let your body heal, cleanse, get everything out, and rebuild it, man. And that's what Khamzat and Islam are doing right now, and I expect them to come out and both get victories, obviously, if you're Islam, in their next fight. Please believe it. Now, let's shift gears to ranking the 13 fights at UFC 300. This is via MMA Junkie, which I thought about doing this on the podcast the last time, but I was like, this is going to be ridiculously hard. So I'm glad they did it for us. We already discussed the bottom three, right? Jessica Andrade, Marina Rodriguez, great fight, but number 13 on this fight card, hard to believe. Bo Nickel, Cody Brundage is 12 because people expect Bo Nickel to go in and get the KO pretty quickly. That's why it's the first fight in the pay-per-view. It's trying to get the crowd hyped up, man, for the rest of the way. Jim Miller, Bobby Green coming in at number 11. Yep. And let's start to go down. Let me jump into the top 5 so you'll know which fights are eliminated. And as we get there, wow, number 5, Yuri versus Rakic. And I see that and I'm like, wow, what other 4 fights are better than that one? Because that's going to be a highly intriguing fight. This was a potential light heavyweight matchup just a year ago before both guys got injured. Jamal Hill came onto the scene, right? Then Alex Pereira came onto the scene and got the belt at a time when virtually everybody's injured. And he fought a Yuri Prochazka that wasn't 100% in terms of, in terms of the mental game, because he's coming off the injury. So Rakic is in that situation, but that's going to be a great fight. This one is interesting. Number 4, Davison Figueiredo versus Cody Garbrandt. Number 4 out of 13. And I don't know if I'd have it that high, but we did say the other day, this is a great first fight. And I don't know if this fight's going to get the accolades that it should, because it's going to be overshadowed by the rest of the card once this fight's over. But that is a great first fight. And to stick that at number 4 is interesting. The main event is number 3, Pereira versus Hill. That's number 3. So who's number 2 and 1? Oliveira versus Saruki in number 2. I dig it. Yeah. And you know I love Dubronx. I want to see him go off on Arman Sarukian. But I do think that's going to be a great fight. And the lightweight division's always got to be up there when you're looking at ranking a card like this. And number 1, I don't know about this. Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway. And this is number 1 because people believe that Max Holloway cannot be KO'd. And it's going to be an absolute battle that Justin Gaethje will win. And Max Holloway might get pummeled in some cases during this fight, but he's not going to give up. And that's going to lead it to be potentially the fight of the night. And that's how you kind of rank this thing, right? If you had to look at one and say, what's going to be the fight of the night? What's going to go to a 3-round, or is this a 5-round fight? I can't remember. But nonetheless, if this goes to a decision, and you're well over 100, 150 significant strikes, it could very well be the fight of the night. So I like the ranking here. I might change number 4, even though I like Figueiredo versus Garbrandt. That's a tough one to stick up at number 4 with all the fights on deck. But that's how MMA Junkie is ranking these fights. And it's highly interesting. It's a great topic for an article because when you're looking at 13 great fights, how do you really rank them? But they did it. And it totally makes sense. I have a couple differences, but I'm not far off from their rankings. Now, Dricus du Plessis refused to let Israel Adesanya dictate UFC 300 booking, right? Saying you are summoned when I say you are summoned. They needed to fill the void as the main event, and they wanted du Plessis to come back in like 6 to 8 weeks. And he's like, no, I'm not doing it. I need to be 100%. And that's where you start to see him respect Adesanya a little bit, saying, in so many words, paraphrasing, that he's obviously a great fighter, was a great champion, and this is not a guy you can play around with. So regardless of all the talk you hear from these two, there's a lot of respect here. And Adesanya would probably benefit from a quick turnaround, and Du Plessis is not going to let that happen. And this matchup is inevitable since Du Plessis beat Robert Whittaker, and they came face-to-face at UFC 290. You remember that tirade that Adesanya let loose with the N-word how many times? I don't know. I lost count. But he went in there and went off, and it made for an interesting situation. And Adesanya knows how to hype up a fight, right? It's like you got to give Adesanya this fight. But I agree with Dricus Du Plessis. He shouldn't be pushed around, man. He should not be pushed around. And he's not going to be. And that fight is going to be interesting. Because you can never count out Israel Adesanya. You just cannot count him out, especially when he's not the champ. Right? He's getting older. He's slowing down a little bit. These other guys are coming up. The youth is on the rise. And when he's the champ, they're coming. But now he's the one coming. And it makes him that much more tough to deal with when he's not the champ because he's hungry. And that's not a good thing for Dricus Du Plessis. And we'll get to that prediction later, but that's going to be one that I'm probably going to drag on for 6 minutes rather than 2 or 3 because it's going to be hard to actually make a decision there. But we'll get to that when the time comes. Dana White reveals the origins of the BMF, declares Max Holloway probably the greatest featherweight of all time. So let's be real with the BMF. And if you didn't see the short we put out earlier, we detailed this in like 50 seconds, but the bottom line is the BMF belt was created really to hype up Masvidal versus Nate Diaz, who are two guys that are no longer really at that point in time. Maybe Masvidal was in title contention, but they needed a fight to fill the void on that particular card, and they needed to come up with a belt, and that's where the BMF belt really originated. Maybe it was thought of before this fight. Maybe you save it for the perfect scenario that you need to hype up a fight, and that's what they did. And now this thing is going and going and going. Islam Makhachev has already shut it down. Says, what kind of belt is this? This is not championship belt. It means nothing. And if Gaethje wins the belt and he gets it strapped around his waist, that doesn't do anything. This fight does nothing for Justin Gaethje. He really should have just sat and waited for the title fight because now it seems like Dustin Poirier, a.k.a. the Diamond, is going to sneak past him after a big win over Benoit Saint-Denis. If Gaethje was available, they would still be able to say, well, Gaethje beat Poirier, but now Gaethje's not available, so that discussion is out, and Islam wants to fight 3 times a year. So it seems to me like DP is up next, but they're going to wait till UFC 300's over because, the Oliveira-Sarukian fight could have a lot to say in that, because if Oliveira wins, then he's deserving of a rematch. So if you're Dustin Poirier, you want this fight signed before UFC 300 starts, and it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case. But before we go any further in the news, that's a fight I wanted to bring the prediction to you the other day. We couldn't get to that video, so now is the best time to do it. So we'll take a quick break during this prediction. We'll come right back with more UFC news, but this is Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway for the so-called BMF belt. Check it out. In the lightweight division at UFC 300, you got Justin Gaethje coming in at 25-4, taking on your boy Max Holloway. He's moving up. He's 25-7. Both guys 5'11". Holloway 32, Gaethje 35. I'd argue both are still in their prime. Gaethje 1-inch reach advantage 70-69. Both guys stand right-handed. Both guys very active, over 7 significant strikes per minute. You can see why it's for the BMF belt. Both guys don't really get takedowns. So it's going to be a stand-up striking affair, power versus speed. And it's really going to be interesting to see if Holloway can hang in this thing because Gaethje has a lot of power. Now he's got a 75% takedown defense that he even more means they're going to be on their feet. Gaethje beat Dustin Poirier in the last fight by KO. Rafael Fiziev by majority decision. His last loss was to Oliveira, who was dominant at the time. That came by rear submission. So that's what Gaethje's got. Now Holloway beats everybody except Volkanovski. He's beating Chan Sung Jung, a.k.a. Korean Zombie, by KO. Arnold Allen, decision. Yair Rodriguez, decision. Calvin Kattar, decision. He lost to Volkanovski back in July of 2022 by decision. He's won 4 of his last 5. He's basically the best fighter in the featherweight division outside of the champ, at least for right now. But this isn't the featherweight division. This is the lightweight division. And even Holloway's dominant in the featherweight division, as is Volkanovski. You see what happens when these guys come up to the lightweight. Holloway is a tough dude, and he very rarely gets finished. But Gaethje is strong as heck, and I think that's why people want to see this fight. It's not so much whether Holloway can win. It would be crazy if he did. It's whether Gaethje can KO Holloway, and that's what people are going to be watching for. I think it'll happen. Gaethje's going to win this fight on the feet in dominant fashion, sheer power, to move to 26-4. Again, will he get the finish or not? That's what we want to see. Lightweight division, UFC 300. Yeah, and that's how he can flip the script on the whole situation. Why is he fighting Max Holloway? No one can understand. You just came off a win against DP. You're ready to fight for the title. Now you're fighting a featherweight who's coming up, who hasn't had success fighting in the lightweight division. He can flip the script with the KO. That's what needs to happen. If Gaethje KOs Holloway, there's going to be some naysayers like, oh, you're supposed to. He's a featherweight. But the fact is nobody has stopped Max Holloway. I repeat, nobody has KO'd Max Holloway. And if he can add his name to that list that doesn't exist, then maybe that catapults him to a title shot. But I have a feeling that Sarukian Oliveira is the one that the UFC is waiting to see how that plays out. And, I don't know that Islam wants to fight Arman Sarukian. So, he's probably rooting for Oliveira because then they'll give him Justin Gaethje, and that's the big fight, or Dustin Poirier, because those are the old heads that aren't going to be around forever, but have been holding on for a long time. And those guys bring viewers. If Gaethje or Poirier is fighting for the title, that's going to be a huge situation for the UFC and the lightweight division. Now, as we march forward, we're getting into another prediction in a minute. Lorisenko says Kayla Harrison joining UFC is exactly what women's MMA needs right now. And she's saying that for the right reasons, because it's going to shake up the division, right? Especially if Kayla Harrison comes in and gets the win. If she doesn't get the win, then it's just like another fight in the women's bantamweight division. So it all is predicated toward Kayla Harrison getting the victory. But does that mean I'm going to go that route? Not necessarily. But let's get into it right now, because this is a highly intriguing fight. Not one of the best fights on the card, but again, the card is stacked. In any other setting, this is a main event, co-main event, or fight 3 at worst. Check it out. In the women's bantamweight division at UFC 300, you got Holly Holm coming in at 15-6, taking on newcomer Kayla Harrison, who comes in at 16-1. She left PFL and is now in the UFC. Both fighters 5'8". Harrison 33 in her prime. Holly Holm 42. Holly Holm has a 3-inch reach advantage. She fights left-handed, lands about 3.2 significant strikes per minute, and lands like 1 takedown every 3 rounds. Stats aren't great, but she wins. That's the bottom line against big-time fighters. The Preacher's Daughter, 78% takedown defense. She's going to need every bit of that. Last fight was a wash. No contest against Mayra Bueno Silva. She did beat Yana Santos by decision. Lost to Ketlin Vieira by split decision. I still question that one. Beat Irene Aldana and Rockwell Pennington, the current champ. So listen, Holly Holm is still in the mix. Now Kayla Harrison, again, 16-1, 6 KOs, 6 submissions, and lost recently against Larissa Pacheco by decision back in November of 2022 at the PFL championships. But before that she hasn't lost, right? 15 straight wins, including Pacheco back in 2019. So that was a battle between those two. And here's the thing, is Pacheco even close to Holly Holm? I say no. Yeah, Holly's getting older, slowing down, but the experience will carry her in this one, in my opinion. I can't see Holly Holm losing this fight. She can't lose this fight. She's got to win. That's why I just think she's going to win. It's real simple. The numbers don't matter here. The KOs, submissions, all that. Holly Holm is different than anything Kayla Harrison has seen before. She's going to win to move to 16-6, women's bantamweight division. UFC 300. And there's going to be a fight, hopefully in the future, that Holly Holm comes out and she just doesn't look the same. But the preacher's daughter trains in an unbelievable way. Despite the age, she continues to show that she's one of the best women fighters in the world. So could someone outside the UFC, impressive as she is, and Kayla Harrison, 15 straight wins, 2-time PFL champion, could she come into the UFC and continue that run? That's where you say, you don't know. Nobody knows. We know Kayla Harrison's really good. We know Holly Holm is a staple in the division for, 6, 8, 10 years? I don't know. She's been there forever. I mean, you can go back to 2014, 2015, 2016, fighting Ronda Rousey and a Nunes and all these. The only thing could make you say that Holly Holm is going to lose is the age and the fact that Kayla Harrison is really good. But it's still the UFC. I don't care what you did in the other ones. I don't care that Michael Chandler was the Bellator champion. Doesn't mean he's going to be the UFC champion. Now, he was very close to doing it against Oliveira, but he didn't do it because there's levels to this game. And the UFC fighters have an advantage on other fighters coming over from different promotions. Make no mistake about it. One of the more interesting stories of the day, if it's even really a story, because I don't think it's going to happen, but Ian Machado Gary saying he signed to fight Colby Covington. He signed. He's on the dotted line. He's ready. But these aren't the type of fights that Colby Covington takes. He takes the safe fights. If any fight is really safe. Colby Covington is looking for the safe route, and you can't blame him because he's looking for the fights. It's going to catapult him back into a title fight. But this time, it's not going to be like others. He's had 3 chances now. And yeah, he fought hurt against Leon Edwards. We found out later, which is why he didn't look normal in that fight. I was highly upset with his performance. But when you find out he was injured, okay, that might be enough to get him a fight for the title again. But he's going to have to go on a run here. He's going to have to take some chances. And he's going to have to prove that he's a top contender in the division by fighting some of these elite fighters in one of the toughest divisions in the UFC. But will Colby take this fight? I don't know. I think he's going to pawn Gary off to someone else because Gary is running through people right now. And I don't know if this is a guy you want to fight because he may be an eventual champion. Do you want to get in his way? Not until he has a title. That would change everything. And this is what Colby Covington has done throughout the years, and nothing is going to change now. He's not going to bend to the pressure. He knows the type of fight he wants, and he'll find 2 or 3 fights he can win to get back into a title fight situation and earn a shot. Israel Adesanya comes out and predicts Jamal Hill will KO Alex Pereira UFC 300. And we got Alex Pereira winning. He's higher up on the due list, but this is all because Jamal Hill had to relinquish a title after the torn Achilles, and now he's coming back 9 months later. And my first inclination is that this is a little early, Jamal. I know that you're doing the UFC a favor because they need a main event, and this is the one that will sell. As long as Alex Pereira's at the top, or Khamzat, it's going to work. But you're jumping in there with a true fighter in Pereira. And if Jamal Hill's 100% and he's got no problems mentally thinking about, am I back to 100%? Am I going to be able? You can't do that against Pereira. You got to come in there 100%. And we've seen Yuri Prochazka struggle. We've seen Chris Weidman struggle in their first fight after an injury. So that's why my prediction for Pereira is not because I don't like Jamal Hill. I mean, I think Jamal Hill can beat Alex Pereira when they're both at their best. But I'm not so sure that they're both at their best at this point in time. And you know what? It may turn out that I'm wrong. We're 5-7 on the year in the main event. It's ridiculous. But I'm sticking with my prediction here simply because Jamal Hill's coming off the injury. And that's always a tough situation, especially when you're coming back in your first fight and fighting at the highest level. So look for Alex Pereira to get the job done, but Jamal Hill will be back. He'll definitely win the next 2 or 3 fights. He'll be fighting for a title again in like early 2026, maybe late 2025. But the time is not now for Jamal Hill. If he wins, I'll be yelling and screaming and happy even though my prediction is wrong. because I'm a Jamal Hill fan. I mean, I'd like to see the guy win it, but I also have to stay true to the prediction and what's in my heart and what I believe is really going to happen. And that's that Jamal Hill will fall. Only because he's going to be thinking about things in his head, like, am I 100%? If I step back on this leg too hard, is something going to happen, right? And you probably don't deal with this as much in training because you're going at like 70% most of the time. And I've seen this as a coach with athletes coming back from injuries. 70%, no problem. They get in the game and their mind starts thinking. The game being football, basketball, track and field, whatever. This situation is even tougher. It's a fight. And you got to be at 100%. And I'm not so sure Jamal Hill will be there. Not necessarily physically. But the physical only matters if the mental is 100%. And I'm saying Jamal Hill won't be 100% mentally there. And that'll be the discussion after the fight. Well, should he have rushed back? This, that, and the other? Well, yeah. Because he's going to get paid handsomely, I'm sure, to fight at the top of UFC 300. And the pay-per-view points coming after this will, continue to come for years to come. Please believe it. And it's kind of like, even though you may not be ready, you got to take the fight, right? Because even if you lose, it's still like, I fought at UFC 300. People are going to remember the main event at UFC 300. But it is an interesting discussion. Please let me know in the comments in the chat room what you think on this one, because it's a highly interesting fight. And I can't wait to see it. By the time this fight comes on, we're going to have gone through 12 unbelievable fights. We'll be live on the watch party, hopefully. And I say hopefully because around here you never know what's going to happen. We just got stuck with a huge storm, lost power for 2 days. Got another storm coming tomorrow that's got me panicked and worried. But the bottom line is we should be live for UFC 300. By the time this fight comes on, it's going to be in the wee hours of the night, past midnight, and it's going to be on and popping. And Bruce Buffer's going to be singing and dancing in the octagon, both before and after the fight. We're going to get to see two warriors go at it. I mean, it doesn't get better than this, man. And now we're just counting down the hours. We're just counting them down. The time is coming. But listen, we're going to wrap this thing up. It's been a great show. Don't know if we'll get back on here before the watch party on Saturday night. But you never know, because there's breaking news all the time, especially on a week like this. But UFC 300 takes the cake this week. For now, this is your boy Chris Cross. Hope you have a great day and God bless. Peace.